bafflement and outrage. The title of my piece today at HartmannReport.com is Kirstin Sinema doesn't want black people to vote, ? You know, I guess the real question is why? Are she and Joe Manchin, and they're in this together. I'm mentioning Sinema in the headline because she's the one who gave the speech yesterday. But, you know, basically she and Joe Manchin, are they both white supremacists? Is that what this is all about? Or are they in league with white supremacists or working for them? Are some of their campaign contributions coming from white supremacist groups? Or two steps removed, are they working for people willing to cynically exploit white supremacy for their own continued wealth and power? I think of, for example, George Herbert Walker Bush with his Willie Horton ads. Or is it possible Amy Siskind is tweeting that she has inside information that Kirstin Sinema has this very small group of people that have surrounded her that, you know, interact with her on her staff and whatnot. She's largely out of touch with the larger electorate because she only meets with wealthy donors. That's it, as far as we can tell. And Amy Siskind says that she and her little tightly knit group have decided that she's a great candidate for president, that she can run as John McCain 2.0. The lovable rogue. Hey, she did thumbs down on minimum wage of $15 an hour, and now she's doing thumbs down on voting rights. Maybe even as a Republican, I don't know. But the one thing I can tell you is that for Manchin and Sinema, this is not about the sanctity or the tradition of the filibuster. Both of them have voted on multiple occasions to go around the filibuster or suspend the filibuster. The last time was just 3 weeks ago when they suspended the filibuster in order to raise the debt ceiling to keep paying our defense contractors so that the defense industry did not have a hit to their profits this year. Honest to God, not making this up. Had the government had they not raised the debt ceiling, the government wouldn't have been able to pay its bills, or it couldn't pay its bills. Hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to defense contractors would be in limbo, among other things. And, you know, those defense contractors basically support every politician in America. They have built defense factories literally in every congressional district. So they had no problem suspending the filibuster 3.5 weeks ago to make sure that the multi-million-dollar-a-year salary CEOs in the defense industry and the billionaire stockholders and company owners got their money. No problem. But how about black people getting the vote? How about Hispanic people and Native Americans and Asian people having the right to vote? How about students being able to vote on campus? How about older, you know, people over 65, Social Security voters who want to vote by mail being able to vote? Oh, no. No. We can't have that, apparently. I mean, back when I was a kid in the 1950s and 60s, we had these same people. You know, Strom Thurmond was the most prominent among them, but John Eastland was another one. There was a bunch of them. And they were mostly Democrats back then. This was pre-65. And they would talk about things like, you know, we have to have bipartisan agreement, and this is about states' rights. And what was the tool that they used? The filibuster. In fact, the filibuster was used exclusively to filibuster civil rights legislation from 1866 to 1965. That's all they used it for, was to block civil rights legislation. So, I mean, you know, that, if nothing else, should tell you pretty much everything you know. Yesterday, Representative Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, she's a regular guest on this program, she said, quote, well, not yet the quote yet. She said, without this voting rights legislation, quote, our democracy doesn't survive without this. This is just an absolute stain on our democracy, and it goes way back. I mean, back in 1811, right? We're now talking about, the presidency of Monroe, I think? It must have been, let's see, Madison? It might have been in Madison. In any case, yeah, it had to have been Madison, 1811. In New York State, freed African Americans could vote legally. Men could vote. And the Democratic Republicans, who were aligned largely with the Southern slaveholders, and didn't like this, and the Federalists were getting, who were the more northern aligned party, the Federalists were getting votes from these African Americans in New York State. And the New York Assembly, the state assembly, was in the hands of the Democratic Republicans, and they were worried about the black vote. And so they passed this law. I mean, this is the first, as far as I can tell, one of the very first voter suppression laws in the United States, in a state where it was legal for black people to vote, that was directed against black people. And it was titled An Act to Prevent Frauds at Election and Slaves from Voting, because what the Democratic Republicans in New York State were claiming was that black people, enslaved people, were escaping from the South, coming up to New York, and even though they hadn't yet proven, gone through the process of becoming illegally and officially free, they were voting. In other words, they were illegal voters. They were illegal immigrants. They were illegals. Honest to God. There's an amazing book called, hang on just a second here, let me get it. It's called In the Shadow of Slavery, African Americans in New York City, 1623 to 1863, by Leslie M. Harris, who's a scholar in this stuff. And she writes, because of the role of the Federalist Party in securing emancipation for New York slaves and the Democratic Republican Party's ties to the slave South, New York's blacks largely supported the Federalists. The Democratic Republican Party in New York City exacerbated this antagonism by focusing on blacks as a key voting bloc that could prevent a Democratic Republican ascendancy in local and state politics. And so they passed this law that I just described. And then she goes on to say, then Democratic Republican inspectors at polling booths attempted to dissuade blacks from voting by harassing them for proof of their freedom. In 1811, the Democratic Republican-dominated New York State legislature made such harassment legal by passing an act to prevent frauds at election and slaves from voting, end quote. She writes, blacks who wished to vote first had to obtain proof of their freedom from a Supreme Court justice, mayor, recorder, or judge of any court of common pleas in the state. They then had to pay that person to draw up the necessary certificate and then bring this proof of their freedom to the polls. It was a voter ID law. And nonetheless, in the election of 1813, the Democratic Republicans lost in that election. The Federalists took over the New York State Assembly. And again, quoting Harris's book, she says, when a close assembly election in 1813 in the midst of the War of 1812 was declared in favor of the Federalists, Democratic Republicans blamed the victory on the 300 black New York City voters. Well, nothing has changed, apparently. So why do you think Manchin and Sinema are taking this action? Like I said, I am not buying this sales pitch that they're putting out that it has to do with the filibuster. They just blew up the filibuster 3 weeks ago so that the CEOs of the defense industry could get paid. I'm not buying it. Is it that they think that there are enough white supremacists in the Democratic base that this is going to help them? Is it that they're planning on flipping to the Republican Party, which has become now the party of white supremacy?